Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Discover conference. I hope you all have discovered breakfast and discovered coffee, and now we're going to discover some new technology stuff. So we have two segments for the lab presentation. This is part one. Part one, we're going to be focusing on the new release of 7.2, and after a little bit later in the morning, we're going to be talking about the second part, which is future developments and other things that are not 7.2 related. But for now, we're going to start with 7.2. And to begin with, I'm just going to go straight to a demo. So this is an example of what the new interface mode we're going to talk about is. It's called My Library, and it's in DIPort. And so we can obviously see there are some differences in the top area. I've got some buttons to choose between different pages that I can go and look at. And there's a big button over here. Let's find out what happens when I click it. It brings up a big menu of all of the pages on this site. On this site we have multiple applications installed, and we can see that each application has, let me see if I can, it's awkward because I'm using the touch screen, and so you can't see the mouse as I'm moving it around. But let's go to, we can collapse hospital operations here, and collapse ambulatory operations, and these various sections with all these pages in them, we can collapse them. We can go to some of these pages by clicking on the buttons that are available for them. I can switch between the pages. I'm going to bring back the My Library again, and notice that, so what we're calling these things, this currently thing that's highlighted with the orange stripe here, that's a shelf in My Library, and we have a lot of different shelves here. Another thing we can do is, suppose I'm looking at one of the pages and I happen to like this page, I want to make a shortcut. And your browser can make a bookmark and it can show up in the little tab, but that's not really integrated with the Diver platform. So for DIVeport and 7.2, we've got the shortcut system. I'm going to click up here on the upper right to add a shortcut for this page. And there we go. Now the label on that one is not as nice. I'm going to try to pick a different one. Let's go with current today. And I'll make a shortcut for that one. And just like that, I've got a new button along the top strip that says current today. If I open up the giant pop-up My Library again, current today is up there among my shortcuts. And if I click edit, I can make some changes. For example, I don't like the name that this one got, so I can change the name of that one. And I can use drag and drop to sort of move them around, change the order. And then another thing that we're going to look at, I'm going to go into a more detail later, so this is kind of a whirlwind tour, but another thing we can do is look at this little icon that's got the person with a pie chart next to them. If I click that to create a new self-service page, then I can choose some measures. This is a new dialog for 7.2. Let's pick a couple of different measures. And then we're going to choose a display type for those measures. We'll pick the simple small one. Okay, that's a new page that I've created as a user, and it shows up right there in the top with my shortcuts. And as before, like that's just another page that I can move around. And then another thing that's happening here, we've got the shared folders section, which is underneath shortcuts. I'll collapse it and expand it so you can see there. These are different areas that I can also put pages in. I can drag this new, the page that I made, or the current today, let's say. Oops, the wrong click. Just drag that down into the shared folder and share it with other people. Oh, this is the wrong user for that. Sorry about that. This user doesn't have access. So another feature of this is access control. So some users can see the shortcuts and not write to them, and some users can also make changes to them. And then the last thing I want to show you here before we actually get back to the slides is this visualization page. This is a page that has giant screenshots of the other pages so that I can kind of get an idea what I'm going to before I click to go into them. If I click on one of these buttons, it'll send me to that page. All right, so that's the quick tour. Now let me actually get to the slides so we can talk about the details here. Yes, right. Okay, My Library. My Library is a new interface in DivePort. So the previous interfaces were classic and simplified. And so if you're familiar with those, this is just another one in the sequence of interface options in DivePort. It's a new navigation system. Instead of having to worry about the sidebar with expanding the tree of pages, or instead of worrying about in classic mode where you've got all the tabs along the top, it gives your users a big overview or sitemap, you might say, of the entire portal. All of the pages that they can reach are available within just a few clicks. There are customizable icons for the shelves and icons for some of the pages, and you can have special pages in your portal get their own icon in the section of the interface. And then this is in 7.2, but I want to make it clear that this is an optional feature, so when you upgrade from 7.1 to 7.2, it's not like your entire portal changes to look like this. This is something if you decide to go for, you'll make a change in your portal settings and switch to it. So the main advantage here is that users can see all the pages they can reach. It's more discoverable is the term we want to use for this, so that users can find your pages better, find them more easily, and also it brings shortcuts to the forefront, right? In DivePort had bookmarks before, and we're trying to kind of changing the name on this. They were bookmarks, and now they're shortcuts, and shortcuts are easier to work with now. They're at the top of the My Library bar. When a user creates a shortcut, it appears directly on their screen. It's not like hidden in a dialog. The bar along the top, which we call the library bar, it shows the current selection, the current page that you're in or display that you're in, and shows nearby displays, so that without even having to open the My Library pop-up, the big overview of all the pages, without having to get to even that screen, you can still switch between some of the local pages with just one click. The pop-up, the My Library pop-up, is a big screen that appears on top of your current page and shows you everything. The terminology we're using for this is that there are sections which are between the bars, between the lines there, which are collapsible. The shelf is a single row in that section, and then the buttons within the shelf. And I talked about the icons for the special features like self-service or the visualization pages. Also, those are up to you. If you have a special page that you think doesn't really deserve a button, but it should be accessible within the section, you can create an icon for it and put it next to the section. The menu portlet, which you may be familiar with, it's something we were using a lot in the simplified UI because it was a way to get people to navigate from the landing page to other pages. That usually shows small buttons with an icon in it. A new feature in 7.2 is that the menu portlet now has a gallery mode, which the main difference is just that the buttons are much bigger, but that gives you room to put a big screenshot in so that people can see it. It also has an option for a video link, which is something that we're experimenting with, which I think helps with onboarding users or helping users to learn what they can do on a certain page. So you make a little video link, you have an embedded video, the user can click there and see that. Okay, the shortcut system I mentioned, shortcuts are stored on DiveLine now. No longer are the bookmarks of DivePort from before were stored in the portal database in DivePort, and shortcuts moves that data to DiveLine, and the reason for that is we want those shortcuts to be usable by multiple products. So not just DiveLine, but DiveTab, or not just DivePort, but DiveTab and Workbench and ProDiver will have access to those shortcuts in the future. And the shortcut isn't just to a DivePort page, it might be to a marker or something like that. Shared folders are a new feature as well. the idea here is that it's the same thing as your personal shortcuts, except that other people can see them. So you can create a shared folder, and then a team of people can collaborate on creating their own pages and sharing them within that team. And it uses access controls on DiveLine, as we showed earlier, so that you can control who can see which folders. In 7.2, self-service is different. The interface for creating a self-service page, you used to have the measures along the side in a little side strip. Now there's a dialog with categories. You can expand. You can check multiple measures at once to create multiple stamps on your self-service page all at the same time. There's also a feature in Measure Factory I didn't put into this demo, but basically in the factory configuration, you can say that certain measures prefer to be displayed using a certain stamp type. And if you do that, then when the user chooses them in self-service, they say, I'd like to see this measure, then it shows up with that stamp type directly. They don't have to choose from the options in the stamp display dialog, which just makes it all the easier for them to create content quicker. All right, and so that is the My Library interface, and available in 7.2, but 7.2 is not just that. There's a bunch more stuff, so I'm going to bring up Joe to talk about some more things in 7.2.
Thank you, Jamie. Yeah, so I'm going to talk about a few quick view improvements that we have in 7.2, and I'm going to start with our new button style quick view. So this is a quick view that takes all of the available options that we have and shows them as clickable buttons. So this is a very simple interface that is a great option if we have a limited number of choices and we want the user to be able to see all of them at once and easily move between them. This will be available anywhere that a Flex Quick View was available before, so this should be usable in pretty much all cases, and it's customizable to skin properties, so we can get this to match the look and feel of your app. I think an exciting application of this is to combine these button-style quick views with stamp variants in order to be able to click a button to very quickly change how the user is seeing the data. So I have an example of that. Pull up here. Control tab. Yep. Thank you. All right, so here I have two of these button-style quick views set up. This one on the bottom is set up for multi-select, so if I want to add some additional sales regions, I can easily do that. And then on the top here, I have this button-style quick view set up for single select, linked to the stamp variants that I've created for the stamp that's backing this portlet. So right now we have a table, so we can see a detailed view of the data. But if I want to see how the data has been changing over time, then I can click on the bar chart button here and view that. Or we have a pie chart option to see how the revenue is split up among product families. So this quick view gives an excellent option to very quickly see what all the available options are and to easily change how the user views the data. Now, the other new quick view I want to talk about is our new calendar quick view UI. So this now works with CBase and dive sources in addition to the marker sources that was supported by our previous calendar quick view. It now allows both single and multiple selection, so you can use this whether the user wants to pick a single date or a range of dates. And we can easily navigate over multiple months or years, so whether you have a short range of time or a long range of time, this quick view should work well. And again, I have a quick demo of that. So here we have the calendar quick view. At the moment, I have this set up for single select, so if I click a date, it will immediately switch to that date and would update the corresponding data. To view different months, we of course have the buttons in the top left and top right of the quick view, but we also have the option to click on the month and year here and get a list of all available months and years in our data. So, for example, if I want to go back to the earliest data in this data set, I can very quickly navigate there. And then, as I mentioned, this also supports multi-select. So if I go into the edit dialog for this, whenever you have a date type column, the calendar type quick view will be available as an option. And if we switch this over to multiple, then the user is able to select a range of dates to display the data for. Yeah, so whatever need you have for showing calendar data and selecting on that, this should work well.
Let's move to the back end and talk about data management and our Spectre engine. A couple things that you'll find in 7.2 that are kind of neat are, one of them is an improvement in how quickly CBases can be written to disk, which is nice for fitting to a small build window. Quick example, 100 million rows, 200 columns, we go from 1 minute to 9 seconds just for the writing to disk part, so being able to write stuff in parallel. It's an example of how we're trying to constantly and continuously improve the engine. There's a feature that is on by default called natural sorting, which takes a column of mixed letters and numbers and sorts it like the numbers would be. So X20 comes after X3, even though 2 is before 3. And sometimes you don't want this. Maybe you have a column of UUIDs, just a gigantic thing of letters and numbers, and you can say, I don't want you to sort that, and now it's 4 times faster if that happens to you. We, in fact, had an example of 100 million UUIDs, and we needed to deal with that. Similarly, another crazy situation related to this is if you know every value is going to be unique, you can tell Spectre that, and it can do things much more quickly. So here's an example, same example, 100 million rows going from 1.4 minutes to 26 seconds on the build there, just because you're able to give us that insight. Now, in a perfect world, there would be no Excel, but there is Excel, so now we are improving our support to bring Excel directly in. So Spectre now has an Excel input object. It can read from XLSX files. And of course, your Excel spreadsheets are never just a nice spreadsheet that has the headers in the top line and then a table of data. So there are heuristics on trying to find where the data starts. You can tell us to skip certain rows. You can say to use a certain range of cells and things like that. So it'll be easier, and I know that Keith will be showing that off in detail in a later session. Similarly, JSON input is a kind of input you may have, kind of data you may have, often comes out of web APIs, and we have support for reading certain kinds of JSON structures. JSON can be structured arbitrarily, basically, but we have a way of describing, how you want to pull fields out of something like this on the right, and that's handy. And then in the future, we'll actually have Spectre be able to talk to web APIs directly. And the last Spectre option I want to mention is data gen. This is just for bringing us sort of parity with an integrator feature of generating random data. This can be nice for doing mock-ups or when you want to report an issue to us but don't want to give us the actual PHI, and it has a bunch of flexible options for how you'd like to do that. On Diveline, there's a new feature called the ODBC registry. Now there is a product we have called DIUC22. It's an ODBC driver that talks to Diveline so you can access your CBases in other products, maybe Excel or something like that. And the difficulty right now is in 7.1, every DSN, every connection definition you make in Windows or whatever has to name one particular CBase or div file. That's sort of irritating. So now we have an ODBC registry where you can say, I want to talk to my data source in 7.2, and it presents like a database of tables. And then on the Diveline side, you create a registry. It says, if somebody asks for master public my sales, then give them in project sales the sales C plan. So that's a nice way of having a single DSN and going wherever the administrator has said you can go, right? And so that's going to be handy both for making sure people don't wander and for just ease of use. So there's coming soon will be a web API. Jim, you want to talk about this one?
Sure. Yeah,
All right.
7.2, there's a lot of stuff in 7.2, and one of the things that is headed for 7.2 but hasn't quite made it in yet is this new web API. We've had this request for a long time for basically a good way for people to extract data from DI sources. When something's in a CBase, sure, you can use Spectre on the command line to dump it out to data, but a lot of other third-party tools would prefer it if they could reach it through some web interface, and that's what we're adding. So really soon, like in the next few weeks, I'm sure, DIPort 7.2 will have this supported HTTP URLs that you can reach that will be able to extract data from Spectre data sources. So we're talking about being able to pull from CBases or cPlans or the factory, and doing all sorts of kind of dive operations on that as well. Not just saying dump the data, but dive on this dimension. I would like these summaries. I would like to sort it this way. I would like to filter it. So a bunch of really powerful tools that from a web accessible perspective. So.
And that'll be great. And now when you're doing something like that, you're going to be in a position where you're trying to write scripts that are trying to like log into DiveLine, you're not going to want to embed your actual DiveLine password or your Active Directory password in these scripts. So we already have added a feature called access tokens, where you can basically say, I would like a temporary or limited access token that I can use to do certain things, so that I could use to log into ODBC, or that I could use for this future web API or dial. And this way, they could be revoked later if you're no longer using them. They're generated by DiveLine, so they're guaranteed to be really strong and full of entropy, and they could expire as well. All right, so continuing on, let's talk about what you'll see in Workbench.
All right, so Workbench, there's really kind of two groups of things that I'm going to talk about here. One of them is Workbench is constantly trying to keep up with these guys and all the new things that they're adding. So that's one thing. And then there's sort of bits that we find that we need over time. Some of you may be aware I've spent the last couple of years undercover working as a consultant and finding out all of the neat things that we can still add for the product. One of these is the table editor, which pretty much, it's been there for years, but some people may have noticed you couldn't add new columns. And it turns out you kind of want to do that sometimes. So one of the latest changes to the table editor is the ability to add columns, rearrange them, and so on. And when the engineer was doing that, he realized, you know, I've got this list of all of the changes that haven't been saved yet to the file. And he says, I could produce this and show this to the user, so now you can see also, you know, we needed this internally, but now you can see, aha, these are the changes that I made, this is why this isn't exactly what I was expecting, and so on. So that's some new features for the table editor. Along that earlier line where these guys keep making more work for us, the Spectre Excel input already has the UI for all of those things that Mike was talking about. How do I only use this range of cells? How do I know what columns are going to come out of my Excel input, and so on. Moving along for dives, and I don't know how many of you use dives within Workbench, but this was a pain point for me anyway. And so one of the things that I changed was I said, all right, well, instead of having the dive run and show you the output in a not terribly useful way, I changed it so that the dive dumps to a file and then opens that file in the table editor. So you can sort, you can filter, you can look for the value that you were looking for, and so on. But it also means very often you're going to run a dive once and save that and use it as a lookup table or something like that in the future. So the new dive editor feature, when you run it, saves the file, and you now have access to that. You can copy it and use it however you want in the future. One other thing, I don't know if you're like me, my browser has like 50 tabs open. I don't know how many of you are like that, but I always have a gajillion tabs open, and I can never find the one that I want. So there was this little-known feature in Workbench where if you hit Control-T, it would actually bring up a little dialog and let you, with a little pull-down, you could look at any tab that you have open at that moment. And I looked at this and I was like, okay, well that's great, except very often I will have a file open in like 3 different projects with the same name. I'm moving from development to production or something like that. And the old dialog didn't really, I couldn't filter on that. I couldn't even see the name of the project in there. And I said, okay, here is an opportunity. So the new Go To tab dialog, it's designed once so you don't have to reach for the mouse. You can do it entirely from the keyboard while you're still working along. It lets you filter to project. It shows you the project for each thing. As soon as you start typing, it starts filtering that list down. So if you know, okay, I want something with ED in the name, but I can't remember exactly what, you start typing, you find it very quickly. That's the new Go To tab dialog. There's a number of also little quality of life improvements. I'm hearing the music that they play at the Oscars when you're running at a time, so. There's a bunch of, basically these were little quality of life improvements that go a long way for a little bit of bang, so they're great. And with that, any questions, come find me later. I'm actually going to bring up Ricky now, so I don't get all of the glory, and he's going to show one of the major new features in 7.2.
Yeah, Markdown editor. I'm not sure if people like to write documentation, but sometimes it's needed. So we decided to improve that a little bit in Workbench. With Markdown files. So what are Markdown files? There are regular text files that you can just type in, and they should be a little bit human readable. So let me open one of them. There's README. You should always have a README in your project. So on the left side, let me zoom in a little bit. This is kind of readable. It's easy to type stuff while you're still developing. It's in Workbench, so having code next to your documentation is a good thing. But the nice thing is you can also make it visually appealing. That's on the right side. So it looks nice, readable, something you like to look at documentation. You can do all kinds of stuff like bullet lists, having the bold and cursive functions, links to websites, so maybe to your online help system. There's some additional fancy things we added, like embedding images that are within your project. Tables, of course, but there's also links to stuff that's also within your project. So I hope you can imagine what kind of cool things you can do with that. So now I'm going to click the link, I'm going to another Markdown file, and I have some scripts or links to scripts that are in my project. Like, well, I have a production script over here. I can click on it. It goes to my production script, so that's nice. I also like using the keyboard, so now I can press Alt backwards. That's the keyboard shortcut James told about. I can go back to my Markdown because I know I want to look at something else. Like maybe a colleague of mine wrote something down, like this is an important calculation. If you're confused, always look at that one first. So that's here. I can click on that one, and we'll go to my calculation node. So it makes it really easy to jump to the correct places where your documentation is. We're thinking about more features, like even adding support for that within the command box itself. So you can really click through your scripts so everything gets easier found. So hopefully that will make your life as a consultant or developer easier.
Okay, so 7.2, these were some of the highlight features from 7.2. There's some other minor things in there as well, but to kind of quickly recap, My Library is the new interface mode. We've got some new features in DIPort with buttons and calendars and the web API that's coming soon. Inspector side, we've got a lot of optimizations, faster C-based writing, and new input types. And then ODBC registry I'm very excited about for people who are using DIWC, lots of changes in Workbench. So I guess the question is, when can you have it? That's the usual question at user group, at the user conference. So 7.2.2 is available today. It is not something you can just go to the website and click and download right now, but if you can contact your support person or your representative or contact us, we can help you get 7.2 set up so that you can try it out. And you're going to ask about what's the big deal about migration? Like how much trouble is it going to be to switch to 7.2? Well, so there are new C-base types. Spectre 7.1.26 can read the new C-bases, so there's no problem with running 7.1 and 7.2 side by side as long as you have a recent 7.1. The major features in 7.2 are all opt-in. They're not just the default. So that means that when you upgrade to 7.2, you won't really see much difference on your site. You're going to need to turn these features on in order to take advantage of them. If you switch to My Library, you're going to probably need to reorganize some of your pages to get them to work in that pop-up with the sections and the shelves and everything. So it's not going to be trivial to just turn My Library on, but just be aware of that. But in the page content should pretty much be the same. Most of the DIPort portlets haven't changed drastically between 7.1 and 7.2, so it should be a nice, easy transition. And that is the end of the 7.2 presentation. So now you know all about 7.2. Thanks.